"What kind of useless junk did you give me?" my father said. Then he slapped me in front of 30 guests holding champagne glasses on the night of his 55th birthday. Inside a house I had scrubbed on my hands and knees since sunrise. I ran out the front door with nothing but a backpack and a fresh bruise on my cheek. I didn't realize it then, but that slap was the last thing Gerald Talbot would ever do to me. Because before midnight, I would be sitting in a black SUV across from a stranger who would say 5 simple words that would tear apart 18 years of lies. Before I continue, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you truly feel connected to this story. Leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. My name is Hillary, even though for most of my life I was forced to answer. To Allison, I'm 21 now. Let me bring you back to that Saturday morning, the day Gerald Talbot turned 55, and the final day I lived under his roof. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., just like every Saturday. But this Saturday came with a 2-page handwritten list Donna had left on the kitchen counter the night before. Sweep the patio. Line up the folding chairs, 32 of them, one for every guest on Gerald's list. Iron the tablecloth. Cut the lemons. Wash the Pottery Barn serving platters by hand because the dishwasher leaves water spots. Their house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Henrico County, Virginia. A 4-bedroom colonial with a perfect lawn Gerald paid someone to mow but told the neighbors I maintained. Inside, the dining table was solid oak, seats 12, polished every week by me. On the counter were 2 cases of Napa Valley Cabernet and a 3-tier cake from a bakery that charged more for fondant than I earned in a week. My room was downstairs, not the finished basement, but the storage closet beside the water heater. No window, a twin mattress Gerald had taken from a curbside pile when I was 9, a wool blanket that always smelled like damp cardboard no matter how many times I washed it. Megan's room was upstairs. Queen bed, flat-screen TV, a vanity mirror, framed with bright Hollywood bulbs. She was 23 and still lived at home. Still had her credit card connected to Gerald's account. Still didn't know how to boil an egg because that was what I was there for. I had spent 3 months saving for Gerald's gift. A real leather wallet from a department store downtown, $84, which may not sound like much unless you're earning $11 an hour scrubbing sheet pans at a restaurant called Rosie's off Route 1. I wrapped it in brown craft paper because I couldn't afford a gift bag. I didn't know, standing there in that kitchen at 5 in the morning with flour on my hands, that the wallet would be the last present I ever gave that man. Gerald came downstairs at 10. Polo shirt, Ralph Lauren, the one with the oversized pony logo, light blue, khakis pressed so sharp they could cut paper, cologne so heavy I could smell it before he reached the doorway. He walked across the patio like a general checking his soldiers, moved one bunch of balloons 6 inches to the left, stared at the lemon slices I had carefully placed in the water pitcher, and said without even glancing at me, "They're uneven. Fix them." Donna appeared at noon, hair perfectly blown out, pearl earrings, a linen dress from Ann Taylor she had ordered online and made me steam the night before. She looked over the kitchen, dragged her finger along the countertop, and whispered something to Gerald I wasn't supposed to hear, but did anyway. "She only got you something cheap. Just be prepared." Megan arrived last, because she always did. New dress, fresh highlights, brand new heels clicking over the floor. The newest series, stainless steel, the one that sells for around $700. She charged it to the extra credit card Gerald had given her for emergencies. Gerald opened it, grinned wide, and kissed her forehead. "That's my girl," he told the first guests coming through the door, his arm wrapped around Megan. "She always knows what her old man likes." He didn't look at me. He never did when other people were around. I was the girl carrying trays, refilling glasses, wiping water rings from the coffee table before they could settle. When one of the guests, a woman from Gerald's office, asked Donna, "Shouldn't Allison, sit down and eat with everyone. Donna smiled the way she always did, warm but closed off, and said, "Oh, she prefers to help. It's how she shows gratitude. You know how it is with adopted children." I kept walking with the tray balanced on my hands. The moment came during the gift opening. Gerald sat at the head of the table like it was a throne. 30 guests arranged. Around him, neighbors, church friends, co-workers from the insurance agency he managed. Champagne glasses catching the glow of the patio string lights. Megan perched on the arm of his chair, recording everything on her iPhone. Donna stood behind him with one hand on his shoulder, looking like a woman who had her whole life perfectly arranged. I stepped forward with the craft paper package. I had written on the front in my neatest handwriting, "Happy birthday, Dad." My hands were shaking, but I tried not to show it. Gerald took the package, weighed it in his hand. For a brief second, I thought he might actually smile. He smiled sometimes when he felt safe from judgment, but instead he tore the paper, pulled out the wallet, flipped it open, snapped it shut, and lifted it into the air like it was proof in a courtroom. "What kind of useless junk did you give me?" His voice sliced through the air. The small talk stopped. Someone placed a glass down very slowly. I tried to explain. "I saved for 3 months. 3 months. And this is all you could manage." He pushed his chair back and stood up. The chair scraped hard against the flagstone. "Even the dog gets better treats." Then he hit me. Open hand across the left side of my face. The sound was sharp and flat, the kind that doesn't need to echo because it already fills the whole space. My head jerked to the side. A champagne glass tipped off the table and shattered on the patio. For one long second, that breaking glass was the only sound anyone heard. No one moved. Donna looked down at her plate. A man from Gerald's office studied his folded napkin like it was fascinating. Megan pressed her lips together but kept filming. Only one person stood up. Ruth Kessler, the 70-year-old neighbor who barely reached 5 feet tall. "Gerald, that was unnecessary. Stay out of my family's business," he snapped. Ruth sat back down, but she did not take her eyes off me. I have never forgotten that look. I stood there with the taste of metal in my mouth and the wallet lying on the ground between us. And inside my mind, a strange thought formed. That slap will matter one day. I didn't fully understand it yet. I wouldn't understand it for hours. But something inside me had started keeping track. I didn't return to the party. I went straight to the storage closet that was called my room. I grabbed the JanSport backpack hanging from a nail on the wall, faded navy blue, zipper slightly torn, the only thing that had stayed with me since high school. I packed quickly. 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans without holes, a toothbrush, my phone charger, the envelope I had found months earlier in a box Gerald threw away, the one with a state seal on it that I hadn't understood at the time. And from inside a shoebox under my mattress, $340 in cash. Mostly $1 and $5 bills, tip money from Rosie's that I had hidden because Gerald checked my bank account regularly. $340. A backpack? A bruise already turning purple along my cheekbone. That was everything I owned. I walked through the living room on my way to the door. The party had continued as if nothing happened. Gerald was laughing loudly at someone's joke, champagne glass in his hand, the wallet nowhere to be seen. Megan was showing guests something on her phone, probably the video. Donna stood near the window and watched me cross the front yard. She reached up and closed the curtain. No one called my name. Outside, the October air hit my face, and the sting on my cheek burned again. Henrico County at 9 p.m. is dark. Not city dark with corner stores glowing at every block, but suburban dark, where the streetlights are far apart and the quiet between houses feels planned. I walked down Patterson Avenue with no clear destination, only the need to move away. Behind me, the music from the party faded until it became a low hum, and then disappeared completely. I had walked maybe 2 miles when headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows and Virginia plates rolled to a stop. About 10 feet ahead. Every instinct inside me said run, but I was so exhausted from always running from things that I stayed still. I thought maybe for once I would see what was coming toward me instead of away from it. A man stepped out first. Mid-50s, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal peacoat I would later learn was from Brooks Brothers. Not flashy, just perfectly fitted, like it had been tailored to him. His hair was dark brown mixed with silver threads. His eyes were hazel green, wide-set, catching the streetlight. They were the exact same eyes I saw in my own reflection. Every morning. Behind him stepped a woman, shorter, red hair pulled back, sharp features, holding a leather portfolio like she had just walked out of a courtroom. She stayed a few steps back, professional and alert. The man looked at me carefully, like he was studying something fragile. When he spoke, his voice was calm but slightly unsteady. "Hillary, we need to talk." 5 words. "Hillary, we need to talk." No. The man's hands were shaking. I could see it even in the dark. "I'm sorry to scare you," he said. His voice broke on the second word. "My name is Richard Whitford, and I believe I am your biological father." I took a step backward. My shoulders bumped. "Into a mailbox post? That's not possible. My biological parents didn't want me. That's what I was always told." "You were told wrong." He slipped his hand into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a photograph. It was small, the corners bent, clearly held and looked at 1,000 times. A woman holding a toddler. The woman had auburn hair and cheekbones like mine, and a smile that tilted slightly to the left. The toddler had hazel green eyes. "Her name was Catherine," he said. "She was your mother. She died in a car accident when you were 2, and I have spent every single day since then trying to find you." I looked at the photograph, then at him, then back at the photograph again, because the woman in it had the same mouth I did, the same tilt of the head, and looking at her felt like finding a word you have been searching for your whole life. The red-haired woman beside him spoke softly. "My name is Margaret Hale. I'm Mr. Whitford's attorney, and I focus on family law. We're not here to take you anywhere you do not want to go. We have been tracking your situation through legal channels for several months. Tonight, when our investigators saw you leave the house, we decided it was the right moment to approach you. You were watching the house." Margaret nodded slowly. "The birthday party, many guests around. It was the safest chance to confirm your identity with our own eyes." She paused briefly. "We also saw you run." I touched my cheek without thinking. The bruise throbbed under my fingers. Richard Whitford looked at the mark on my face, and something behind his eyes seemed to break very quietly. We sat in the back of the Escalade. Richard on one side, me on the other. Margaret in the front passenger seat, with her leather portfolio open on her lap. The engine was still running, the heater set on low. It was the warmest I had felt all night. Richard told me the story like a man who had practiced it for 18 years, and still was not prepared to say it out loud. Catherine died on I-64 eastbound on a Tuesday morning in March. A delivery truck crossed the median line. She was killed instantly. Richard was in the passenger seat. Shattered pelvis, collapsed lung, for long months in the hospital. I, Hillary, was at home with a neighbor at the time. "While I was in the ICU," he said, "Child Protective Services placed you in emergency foster care. Standard procedure when there is no available parent." I understood that part. What I did not understand was what came next. When I was released from the hospital and filed the paperwork to bring you home, they told me I could not. A social worker named Leonard Grubb handled the case. Grubb informed the family court that Richard had signed a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, a legal document giving up custody permanently. Grubb presented the court with a signed form. The judge approved the adoption based on that paper. "I never signed anything," Richard said. I was on a ventilator. I could not even hold a pen, let alone read a legal document. But the court had a piece of paper with my name written on it, and that was enough for them. By the time Richard hired an attorney and challenged the ruling, it was already too late. The adoption had been finalized. The file was sealed. His daughter had a new name, a new family, a new life somewhere in Virginia that he was not allowed to know about. So I hired investigators, he said quietly. Year after year, I spent money. It does not matter how much I spent. I would have spent everything. His voice did not shake when he spoke about the money. It trembled when he said the word everything. Leonard Grubb, I said slowly. How much did they pay him? Richard glanced at Margaret. Margaret closed her portfolio and said calmly, that is what we plan to prove in court. The SUV was still parked on Patterson Avenue, hazard lights flashing amber. Into the dark street, I sat with my backpack on my lap, gripping the straps like a child on the first day of school, and I told them about the envelope. Last spring, Gerald decided Megan needed a yoga studio inside the house. That meant clearing the storage closet, which was my room, and moving my things into an even smaller space near the furnace. He shoved most of my belongings into a garbage bag and threw it near the curb. I went through the bag before the trash truck arrived because that is what you learn to do when nothing you own feels safe. You check everything. You rescue what you can. At the bottom of a water-damaged cardboard box, under old report cards and a Ziploc bag filled with baby clothes, I found a manila envelope that looked official. The return address had a seal and the words Virginia Department of Social Services. Printed clearly, inside was a single document, partly blacked out, with the heading title for E-Adoption Assistance Monthly Disbursement Summary. And across the top, typed in plain government font, Allison G. Talbot. I did not know what title for E meant. I did not know what a disbursement summary was, but I knew my name was printed on a government paper that Gerald had never shown me. So I folded it carefully and put it into my backpack. I had been carrying it for 6 months without fully knowing why. I pulled it out now and handed it to Margaret. She unfolded it under the dome light, and I watched her expression shift. Not in a dramatic way, but like a poker player's face when the final card is turned over. This is the adoption subsidy record, she said quietly. The state of Virginia has been paying Gerald and Donna Talbot approximately $810 per month for your care and maintenance for 18 years. She looked directly at me. That equals roughly $175,000. How much of that did you ever see? I thought of the mattress taken from the curb, the blanket that smelled like damp cardboard, the closet with no window, and barely enough space to stretch out. None, I answered. Richard turned his face toward the window, and in the reflection of the glass I could see him clenching his jaw so tightly the muscle jumped. All those years, I whispered half to myself, he called me a burden, but I was not a burden, I was a paycheck. Margaret drove us to a Hilton off Broad Street, not back to the Talbot house, not to a shelter, just somewhere clean and quiet and safe. Richard checked us in under his name. Separate rooms with an adjoining door, and the first thing I did was stand in the middle of mine and not know what to do with myself. The bed had white sheets that smelled like fresh detergent instead of mildew. There was a real window. I opened the curtains and just stared out at the parking lot lights for a long time because looking out of a window from my own room was something I had not done in years. While I stood there, memories came in layers, the way water slowly rises, steady and cold. I began cooking the family meals when I was 10 years old. Gerald said it was to teach me responsibility. By 12, I was doing all the laundry, washing all the dishes, and handling all the grocery shopping on foot because Gerald refused to drive me. Megan received a Toyota Camry for her 16th birthday. I received a bus pass that expired after 1 month because no one renewed it. So I walked an hour and a half to Rosie's for my shifts. Gerald never allowed me to keep my own documents. No birth certificate, no social security card, no state ID. When I asked about getting a driver's license at 17, he said, "What for? You do not have anywhere to go." At that time, I believed he was right. Now I understood he had arranged it that way on purpose. I kept asking myself, why did Gerald keep me all those years if he hated me so much? Why not send me back into the system? If I was so worthless, why keep me at all? Now I finally had the answer. $810 a month. That was why. Have you ever met someone who despised you but refused to let you leave? Someone who made you feel like trash but held on to you like you were precious? If you have, then you already know what that math looks like. Donna's voice echoed in my head the way it always did, sweet but sharp like lemon juice on a fresh cut. Gratitude, Allison. That is all we have ever asked for. Is that really so difficult? No, Donna. What was difficult was realizing I had been grateful to people who were taking from me the whole time. Let me go back 2 weeks before the party, before the slap, before any of this happened. Because the truth is, Gerald had already shown me exactly who he was. I just did not yet have the words to describe it. It was a Tuesday evening. Gerald called me into his home office, the room no one entered without permission. A heavy mahogany desk, a leather wingback chair, a shelf of hardcover books he had never read, arranged neatly by color. He was sitting behind the desk like a judge in a courtroom, a manila folder open in front of him. "Sit down," he said. "Not have a seat. Sit down." He pushed a document across the desk toward me. 10, maybe 12 pages, thick print, a blue signature tab sticking out from the bottom edge. "This is a voluntary agreement," he said. "It states that you choose to remain under my guardianship because you are not financially or emotionally ready to live on your own. Sign it." I picked it up carefully. Most of the language was hard to understand. Phrases like, "Whereas the dependent acknowledges that independent living presents undue financial and psychological risk." But one clause on page 4 I understood perfectly, and when I read it, something cold settled deep in my stomach and refused to move. The agreement allowed Gerald to keep managing all state and federal benefits connected to the dependent care. He wanted me to sign over my own subsidy again, this time willingly with my adult signature, so he could continue collecting the money, even after I aged out of the system. "Why do I need to sign this?" I asked him. Gerald's face didn't change at all. "Because without this family, you'll be out on the street. You don't have a college degree. You don't have any savings. You don't even have proper identification. So you're going to sign this, and you're going to sign it before my birthday. Think of it as your present to me." I didn't sign. I asked for more time to think. Gerald didn't respond. He simply shut the folder and slid it back into the desk drawer, slowly, the way someone puts a loaded weapon into a locked box. That's why he hit me at the party. It wasn't about the wallet. It was never really about the wallet. It was because I had told him no for the first time in 18 years, and he couldn't handle it. Back at the Hilton the next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. out of habit, my heart racing, already going through a list of chores in my mind before I remembered. There was no list anymore. There was only a hotel room with bright white sheets and a wide window showing a gray October sky. A soft knock came at the adjoining door. Richard was already dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee from the lobby downstairs. He placed one on the desk and sat in the chair across the room. Not too close, like he was worried that if he moved too quickly, I might vanish again. Margaret arrived at 8, carrying a garment bag. Inside were a pair of new jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, still with the tags attached. "Something fresh to wear," she said, practical as ever. I carried them into the bathroom and changed, then stood in front of the mirror for a long time. It was the first time in my life that I was wearing clothes that no one else had worn before me. When I stepped back into the room, Richard's eyes turned red around the edges, but he didn't cry. He only nodded and said, Catherine had that same expression. Like she was deciding whether she could trust the mirror. I sat on the edge of the bed and said what had been on my mind all night. I need proof. Not just the photograph. Not only the story. I need a DNA test. If you are who you say you are, science will confirm it. And if you're not, I need to know that too. Richard didn't hesitate. Of course. Margaret has already found an AAB-accredited lab in Richmond. We can go today. There was no pause, no offense taken, no attempt to make me feel guilty. Just of course, I had spent 21 years in a house where asking a simple question was treated like a personal insult. And here was a man who answered as if questions were the most normal thing in the world. I've spent my whole life doing what I was told, I said. If I'm going to trust you, it will be because I choose to, not because I have nowhere else to go. Richard set his coffee down carefully. That's exactly how it should be. The lab was a small brick building off Carey Street, clean and bright under fluorescent lights. A technician wearing blue scrubs swabbed the inside of my cheek. Then she labeled the small vials and told us the results would take 3 to 5 business days. 5 days. I had waited 21 years to find out who I really was. 5 more. Days felt like trying to hold my breath underwater. While we waited, Richard brought things to the hotel. Not gifts, not in the way Gerald gave gifts, like business deals with strings attached, but pieces of history. An old photo album. Catherine. Pregnant, laughing on a porch swing, one hand resting on her stomach. Catherine holding a newborn baby in a pink knit hat. Richard and Catherine and the baby standing in front of a brick bungalow in Richmond's fan district with a bright red door. The baby already had hazel green eyes. That's the house you came home to, Richard said quietly. I still own it. I couldn't make myself sell it. I studied each photograph like it was a paper I needed to memorize for an exam. My mother's face, her hands, the way she stood slightly tilted, her weight resting on her left foot, the same way I stand when I'm not thinking about it. She's beautiful, I said softly. You look just like her, he answered, especially the eyes. On the 5th day, Margaret called. I was sitting on the hotel bed with the album open to a photo of Catherine blowing out birthday candles when my phone rang. 99.998% probability of paternity, Margaret said clearly. It's confirmed. Richard Whitford. Is your biological father? I didn't speak right away. I just held the phone and stared at the photograph and felt something open inside my chest. Not break apart, not shatter, but open like a door when someone finally turns the handle from the other side. 99.998%. It was just a number. But to me, it was the first real proof in 21 years that I was not a mistake that nobody wanted. Margaret's voice came through again, calm and exact. Now we have enough. The next step is family court. From Ruth Kessler's testimony, from the messages Sedana would later give to Margaret. The morning after the party, Gerald called the Honorico County Police and reported me missing, not because he was worried, but because he was calculating his next move. The officer who came ran my information and told Gerald what he did not want to hear. I was 21, a legal adult. If I had left by choice, there was no missing person case to open. She didn't leave by choice, Gerald told the officer. She's mentally unstable. She can barely manage without supervision. The officer asked if Gerald had any documents to prove that. A medical diagnosis, a guardianship order, anything official. Gerald did not, because I was not mentally unstable. I was simply controlled. That night, according to Donna's texts, the ones she would later hand over as evidence, Gerald paced back and forth in the living room for 3 hours. Donna sat on the couch and typed exactly what he said. Gerald, if that girl talks to anyone, Child Protective Services, a lawyer, anyone, we're finished. Find the adoption file, all of it. The originals. Donna, you said, she doesn't know anything, Gerald. She doesn't, but if someone shows her where to look, he knew. He had always known. The forged signature. The bribed caseworker. The subsidy he had been collecting for 18 years for a child he treated like unpaid help. Gerald carried all of it in his mind the way some men carry heavy debt. Always aware, always managing, never once thinking that the whole structure could fall apart. Gerald wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of what I would discover once I was free. He didn't know that the man he should have feared, the man who had spent 18 years and paid a private investigator to find his daughter, was sitting in a Hilton 20 minutes away. Building a file 3 inches thick, Margaret spread the papers across the hotel desk like a surgeon arranging tools before an operation. This was the second time I saw the evidence, but now it felt sharper, more dangerous. Look at this, she said, sliding a copied form toward me. It was the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights dated October 2005. At the bottom was a signature, Richard A. Whitford. Neat, careful, slightly leaning forward. Then she placed another page beside it, a certified report from a forensic document examiner, Dr. Ella Marsh, who had compared the signature on the relinquishment form to 12 known examples of Richard's handwriting, including tax returns, mortgage papers, and business contracts covering 20 years. The pen pressure is inconsistent, Margaret explained, pointing to the lines. The letter shapes in the last name do not match any of the known samples. Dr. Marsh's conclusion, and I'm quoting directly, is that the signature was written by someone other than Richard A. Whitford with a high degree of certainty. She let the words sit in the air. Then she took out a third document, a bank record from a personal checking account belonging to Leonard Grubb, the social worker who handled my case. On October 14, 2005, 6 days before the adoption was finalized, a deposit of $5,000 appeared. The source was a wire transfer from Gerald R. Talbot's personal account, not through the church, Margaret said, not through any charity, directly from one account to another. 1 week before the adoption was approved, I stared at the numbers. $5,000. That was what my entire identity had cost. My name, my father, my childhood, traded for the price of a used car. Richard sat across the room with his arms crossed tightly, his jaw set. He had seen these papers before, but watching me read them was different. I could tell by the way he breathed, shallow and careful, like someone trying not to crush something fragile by holding it too tightly. So the adoption can be reversed. I asked quietly. Margaret closed the folder. Under Virginia law, an adoption obtained through fraud, including forged consent, can be declared void. Yes, it can be undone. 2 days before the court date, a letter arrived at the Hilton front desk addressed to me as Allison Talbot, not Hillary Whitford, because Gerald still refused to accept that I had any other name. Inside was a single sheet of paper on Gerald's insurance agency letterhead, handwritten, and a photograph. It was me at 3 years old, sitting on Gerald's lap in the living room of the house on the cul-de-sac, my small hands folded in my lap, my face turned slightly toward the camera. Gerald was smiling in the picture, wide and confident, like a proud father. But I remember that day differently. I remember being told to sit still. I remember being told to smile. I remember that if I moved too much, everything you have is because of me. I gave you a home when no one else wanted you. I gave you food, clothes, schooling. You think this man can replace 18 years. Blood does not make a family. Loyalty does. If you continue with this court case, you will regret it. You are not prepared for the world outside this family. Think carefully before you throw away the only security you have ever known. No apology. No mention of the hit at the party. No explanation, just control, wrapped in neat handwriting. I read it twice and then handed it to Margaret. She read it once and placed it calmly into the file. "This will help us," she said. "It shows continued coercion and emotional manipulation. Richard didn't ask to see the photograph right away. When he finally did, he held it carefully by the edges. That was the year you broke your arm," he said quietly, looking at me instead of the picture. "The hospital told me a 3-year-old doesn't usually fall downstairs with that kind of fracture pattern." I felt the room go very still. "We'll include that too," Margaret said gently. That night I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, the future felt uncertain in a different way. Not like a threat, not like a warning, but like an open space. I didn't know what my last name would officially be in a month. I didn't know where I would live. I didn't know how much of my past would survive the courtroom, but I knew this. I had said no. I had asked questions. I had demanded proof. And for the first time the answers were coming, not as orders, not as threats. 0.998%. A number that meant I belonged to someone who had been looking for me. A number that meant the story I had been told for 18 years was not the only story. A number that meant the door had opened, and this time, I was the one choosing whether to walk through it, wearing a soft pink dress I don't remember ever owning. He was smiling gently. I was smiling too. "It looked like a real family," the letter said. "Allison, I don't know who this man is or what he has told you, but he is not your father. He is a stranger taking advantage of a confused young woman. We are your family. We have been your family for 18 years. Come home. We can fix this. I forgive you for leaving." Dad, I read it 3 times. The word forgive felt different each time. First, it felt like a door slowly opening. Then it felt like a lock clicking shut. Then it felt like a hand grabbing my wrist tightly. He forgave me for leaving after he hit me. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and felt the room spin slightly. 18 years of conditioning does not just turn off because a DNA test says 99.998%. Somewhere deep inside me, a voice I had carried since childhood whispered, "What if Gerald is right? What if this is all a lie? What if Richard only wants something from you too?" I looked at Richard, who was reading quietly in the chair by the window, and said, "How do I know you're not the same as him? How do I know you won't use me for something else?" He closed his book carefully. He did not look hurt. He looked like a man who understood exactly why I was asking that question. "You don't," he said calmly. "Not yet, and I am not going to try to convince you with words. Words are cheap. The DNA does not lie. The documents do not lie. And the court will decide what is true. All I'm asking is that you let the evidence speak." Then he picked up his book again and went back to reading. And that, the not pushing, the giving me space, was the thing that scared me most because it was so different from everything I had ever known. That night, I could not sleep. So I did what I always did when the world stopped making sense. I looked at the evidence. I took the Title 4 envelope from my backpack and placed it on the desk next to Gerald's letter. 2 documents, one from the state of Virginia confirming that Gerald received $810 a month to take care of me. One from Gerald claiming he was my loving family. If Gerald loved me, why did I sleep in a storage closet? If Gerald loved me, why did I not have a birth certificate, a social security card, or a single piece of identification with my name on it? If Gerald loved me, why was the guardianship extension he tried to make me sign designed to keep the subsidy money coming, not to keep me safe? The answer was in the numbers. It had always been in the numbers. Gerald did not love me. Gerald billed me. I called Margaret at 11 p.m. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting for this call. "I'm going to court," I said. "Not because I trust Richard, not fully, not yet, But because I deserve to know the truth, I've earned that much. That's all we need, she said. The next afternoon, Derek Simmons came to the hotel. He was in his mid-40s, square jaw, serious face, a social worker with the Virginia Department of Social Services, assigned to review Richard's petition. He asked about my living conditions growing up. I told him about the closet, the endless chores, the missing documents, the isolation, the way I was kept separate from everything normal. He wrote everything down carefully in a small notebook. When I finished, he did not say, "I'm sorry," or "that must have been difficult." He said, "What you are describing, if it is supported by the records, qualifies as neglect. And the financial part qualifies as misuse of adoption assistance funds." Then he looked at me and added more quietly, "This is not just about your adoption being fraudulent, Miss Whitford. This is about a system that was supposed to protect you and failed." I am not choosing Richard over Gerald, I told myself as Derek left. I am choosing the truth over the lie I have been living. I did not see this next part happen. It came out later, piece by piece, through Donna's testimony and the text messages she handed over. But I will tell it the way it happened, because you need to understand who Gerald believed he was walking into that courtroom to face. The night before the hearing, Gerald sat at the dining room table, the same oak table I had polished every week. For 18 years, and practiced his testimony with his lawyer, not someone like Margaret, just a general lawyer from a small strip mall office who charged by the half hour and had never handled an adoption fraud case before. "I have all the paperwork," Gerald said confidently. "Signed, sealed, stamped by the court. I've been a member of First Baptist Church for 22 years. I coach Little League. Everyone in this community knows me." Donna, sitting across from him, dared to ask a careful question. "What about the subsidy envelope? What if they ask about the money?" Gerald did not even look up. "Nobody audits that. We're fine." Megan walked through on her way to the kitchen and asked in a bored voice, the voice of someone whose biggest worry was slow Wi-Fi, "If Allison doesn't come back, can I turn her room into a walk-in closet?" Gerald did not answer her either. He was already building his opening speech in his head, the one where he would stand before a judge and explain what a generous, God-fearing man he was for taking in a child nobody else wanted. He did not know that the judge would be looking at a 3-inch file full of forged signatures, bribery records, and a forensic examiner's report. He did not know that the girl he raised to stay silent had finally found her voice. He did not know that the man sitting across the aisle would be the father, whose name someone had forged 18 years ago. Gerald walked into that courtroom like a man who had never lost before. He was about to learn what losing truly looked like. On the morning of the hearing, Margaret turned the hotel conference room into a command center. She had reserved a large table and covered it with 5 neat stacks of documents, each marked with colored tabs. I sat at one end holding a cup of coffee that was slowly getting cold, and she walked me through the case the way a general reviews a battle plan. Calm, careful, leaving nothing to chance. "Stack 1, she said, touching the first pile. "DNA results. AAB accredited lab, chain of custody documented. 99.998% probability. Irrefutable. Stack 2. Forensic handwriting analysis from Dr. Elaine Marsh. The signature on the relinquishment form is not Richard's. Her report is 46 pages long, but the conclusion is one clear sentence. Stack 3. Financial records from the Virginia Department of Social Services. Gerald and Donna Talbot received $810 per month in Title IV adoption assistance for approximately through 116 months. Total, $174,960. Derek Simmons' assessment confirms. The funds were not used for your welfare. Stack 4. Derek's full report. Findings of neglect. No medical records after age 14. No personal identification documents in your possession. Living conditions inconsistent with the purpose of adoption assistance. Stack 5. She paused slightly. A sworn statement from Ruth Kessler, your former neighbor. She has agreed to testify that she saw ongoing unequal treatment and personally witnessed Gerald strike you at the birthday party. Ruth, 70 years old, 5 feet tall, the only person in that backyard who stood up for me. I had not spoken to her since that night, and she had not hesitated. Do I have to speak in court? I asked quietly. Margaret looked at me steadily. Only if you want to. The paperwork speaks clearly on its own. Richard, sitting at the far end of the table, had been silent the whole time. Now he spoke once. Whatever happens in there, you've already won. You're free. I looked at the 5 stacks of documents on the table. A lifetime of lies broken down into folders with colored tabs. And I thought, no, I haven't won yet. But I am very close. That afternoon, Richard took me to Banana Republic. Not because the clothes were important, but because he said, you should walk into that room looking exactly like who you are. Someone who deserves to be heard. I tried on a navy blazer, a white silk blouse, charcoal slacks. I stood in front of the fitting room mirror and looked at the person staring back at me. She had straight shoulders and steady eyes. She looked like someone who might sit at a conference table, not carry trays to one. Your mother used to do that, Richard said when I stepped out. He was leaning against the wall outside the fitting rooms, hands in his coat pockets. She would stand in front of the mirror for a long time. Then she would smile at herself. Just a small smile, like she had decided something important. I had not smiled. Something inside me was settling into place. On the drive back, Richard pointed to a brick bungalow on a tree-lined street in the Fan District. Red front door, white shutters, a porch swing hanging still in the cool October air. That's the house, he said quietly. The one in the photos. I looked at it through the car window. The house I had been born into. The house I had been taken from. I did not feel the sharp ache I expected. I felt something softer, a quiet recognition that lived in my body instead of my mind. That night, the night before the hearing, I sat on the hotel bed and wrote in a notebook I had bought at the CVS across the street. I wrote every memory I could. Still see clearly the closet. The birthdays where I served cake instead of blowing out candles. The Christmas mornings where I watched Megan open gifts while I washed dishes. The sound of Gerald's footsteps in the hallway. The way I learned to read his mood from the way he closed a door. I wrote about the envelope with the state seal. About the missing birth certificate. About the way I used to imagine that somewhere there was another life with my name on it. By the time I finished, my hand hurt and the city outside the hotel window had gone quiet. I closed the notebook and placed it next to the 5 stacks of documents Margaret had prepared. For the first time in my life, I was not walking into a room, alone and unprepared. For the first time in my life, the truth was not just something I felt. It was something I could prove. And in the silence of that hotel room, with the evidence laid out beside me and tomorrow waiting on the other side of sleep, I realized something simple and clear. No matter what the judge decided, no matter what Gerald said, no matter how loudly he tried to rewrite the past, I was no longer the girl in the storage closet. I was the girl who opened the envelope. I was the girl who asked the question. I was the girl who chose the truth, and that changed everything. This was not a speech, not a strategy, just one sentence I said quietly to myself. No matter what takes place tomorrow, I will never return to that storage room. I will never respond to a name that is not truly mine. I will never again say thank you for being treated like an object. I slept only for hours. I dreamed about a red front door swinging open, Richmond Family Court, a Tuesday morning near the end of October. The building was made of old federal brick, with tall columns at the entrance, and hallway floors that echoed every step, as if the walls wanted everyone to know exactly who was walking in. I arrived at 8:30 with Richard on my left and Margaret on my right. Derek Simmons followed a few steps behind us, carrying a banker's box filled with records. I wore a navy blazer, a white blouse, my hair tied back in a low knot. No jewelry. I didn't own any, but my hands were calm and my back was straight. Gerald showed up at 8:40. Gray suit, burgundy tie, Donna holding his arm in her Ann Taylor dress, Megan walking behind them in something far too casual for a courtroom. His attorney carried one slim file folder. Gerald carried his chin lifted, at the angle of a man who believed the day was just a routine formality. Then he noticed us. They took in the blazer, the posture, the missing girl who once stared at the ground. Then his gaze shifted to Richard, then to Margaret, then to the banker's box Derek was placing on the plaintiff's table. Gerald's face did not fall apart, it adjusted. I had seen that look before. The quick mental math of a man who controls every detail, suddenly realizing there is one detail he failed to see. Donna's fingers tightened around his arm. Megan pulled out her phone, hesitated, then slipped it back into her purse. Gerald and I locked eyes across the hallway. For the first time in my life, I did not lower mine. The clerk opened the courtroom doors and called the case. In the matter of the adoption of the minor formerly known as Hillary Whitford, now styled Allison Grace Talbot. We walked inside, both sides entering through the same door, yet coming from entirely different worlds. Margaret stood the way I imagined a scalpel would stand if it could stand. Straight, exact, catching the light. She addressed the judge, the Honorable Patricia Dwyer, without a single note in her hand. Your Honor, we are here today to present proof that the adoption of Hillary Whitford, known for the last 18 years as Allison Grace Talbot, was secured through fraud, specifically, the falsifying of a biological parent's consent to surrender parental rights, made possible by a financial payment to the assigned social worker on the case. She introduced the DNA results first, the sworn affidavit from the lab technician, the clear chain of custody, the number 99.998%. Judge Dwyer studied the report carefully, adjusted her reading glasses, and set it aside with a small, thoughtful nod. Then Margaret presented the forensic handwriting examination. Dr. Ella Marsh's 46-page report, reduced to its final line, "It is my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that the signature on the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, dated October 2005, was not written by Richard A. Whitford." Gerald's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client has a legally executed adoption decree approved by this court system nearly 20 years ago. The petitioner is attempting to reopen a settled matter based on the opinion of a paid expert. Margaret did not even turn around. Your Honor, a decree built upon a forged signature is not settled, it is hidden. We are here to reveal what was hidden. I heard Ruth Kessler shift in her seat in the gallery behind me. A man I did not know sat beside her. Later I learned he was a courthouse reporter for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. He wrote something quickly in a thin notebook. Two women from Gerald's church sat in the second row, their expressions tight with the special discomfort of people watching a reputation come apart in real time. Judge Dwyer looked at Gerald's attorney over the top of her glasses. The court will hear the petitioner's complete presentation. Continue, Miss Hale. Margaret moved to the financial documents, and this was the moment the air in the courtroom shifted. She projected the title for e-disbursement summary onto the large screen. The same paper I had pulled from a trash bag 6 months earlier, month after month, year after year. A line of numbers running down the page like a financial record of my childhood, Mr. Talbot, Margaret said after the judge allowed direct questioning. The state of Virginia paid your household $810 each month in adoption assistance for the care of the child placed with you for approximately 18 years. That equals $174,960. Can you explain to the court how those funds were used for the child's well-being? Gerald straightened in his seat. Everything was spent on the girl. We fed her, dressed her, and kept a roof over her head. 18 years of that costs money. Margaret nodded as if she had expected that answer, which she had. Then she called Derek Simmons to the stand. Derek approached, carrying his report like someone carrying something both heavy and important. He had visited the Talbot home. He had reviewed the documents. He spoke in a steady, neutral voice, which made every detail land harder. The child's living space was a converted storage area beside the home's water heater, approximately 60 square feet. No outside window, no closet. The mattress showed clear wear and water stains consistent with being taken from curbside trash. I found no medical records for the child after age 14. No pediatric visits, no dental records, no immunizations after 8th grade. The child had no state-issued identification, no social security card in her possession, and no documented access to her own adoption file. He looked directly at the judge. In my professional opinion, Your Honor, the living conditions described and observed are consistent with child neglect, not with the intended purpose of adoption assistance funds. Donna began to cry, softly at first, then louder. The kind of crying that pulls attention. Gerald squeezed her hand and set his jaw, showing the picture of a husband protecting a delicate wife from unfair claims. But Ruth Kessler was next. She stepped to the stand wearing a navy cardigan and practical flats, and she did not perform. I have lived next door to that family for 12 years, Ruth said. I watched that girl mow their lawn, wash their cars, hang laundry in the backyard while the other daughter, the biological one, lay in the sun on a lounge chair. I never once saw Allison, Hillary, sit at their dinner table when guests were present. And on the night of Mr. Talbot's birthday, I watched him hit her across the face in front of 30 people because she gave him a gift he believed was not good enough. The courtroom became quiet in the way a room turns quiet when everyone inside is adjusting what they thought was true. Margaret waited for Ruth to step down, then faced Gerald again. Mr. Talbot, do you know a man named Leonard Grubb? Gerald did not blink. No. Margaret held up a glossy photograph with a date printed in the corner. 2 men stood beside a folding table at an outdoor gathering. One was Gerald, 10 years younger, wearing a polo shirt and holding a paper plate. The other was a thin man with glasses and a Virginia DSS lanyard around his neck. This photo was taken at the First Baptist Church Community Picnic in June 2004, Margaret said, 1 year before the adoption was finalized. The man standing beside you is Leonard Grubb, the social worker assigned to Hillary Whitford's case. Do you still say you do not know him? Gerald's jaw tightened. I may have met him briefly. Church events are large. I cannot remember every face. You remembered him well enough to send him $5,000. Margaret placed the bank statement on the screen. Gerald's personal checking account. October 14, 2005. Wire transfer. Recipient Leonard M. Grubb. Can you explain this payment? That was a donation for the churches. It was a community contribution. Sent from your personal account directly to Mr. Grubb's personal account, not to the church's account. Gerald turned toward his lawyer, who was staring at the table's surface as if searching for a way out. No objection was raised. I gave that girl everything. Gerald's voice cracked sharply, like a slap. He stood up, one hand flat on the table. 18 years, a home, food, and this is the thanks I receive. Some stranger shows up, and suddenly, I am the villain. Mr. Talbot, Judge Dwyer's voice was low and firm. Sit down now. He sat, but the room had already heard it. The crack in the mask, the sense of entitlement pouring out. In the gallery, the churchwomen looked down at their hands. The courthouse reporter's pen moved more quickly. Margaret turned to the judge with the calm of someone who had just watched her opponent damage his own case. Your Honor, We ask the court to note Mr. Talbot's description of his parental role as something he gave and now expects repayment for. That is not parenting. That is a business exchange. Margaret then looked at me. I had told her the night before, I want to speak. Not because the case required it. The evidence was strong enough, but because I had been silent for 21 years. And some truths need to be spoken by the person who lived them. Your Honor, the petitioner's daughter would like permission to address the court if allowed.
If you like a video, then subscribe my channel.